The wind was still that morning as I wandered the desolate field. Gray skies hung low, pressing against the earth like a heavy hand. This place wasn't on any map, just a forgotten patch of dirt that time seemed to have abandoned. I wouldn't have found it if not for a rumor overheard in a bar, whispered by a man whose eyes darted like a cornered animal. "There's a tree," he said, his voice barely audible over the din of the bar. "Middle of nowhere. It talks." I laughed it off at first, chalking it up to drunken ramblings. But the way he said it, his voice trembling, his knuckles white as they gripped his drink, stirred something in me. Curiosity? Or maybe something deeper, darker. 2 weeks later, I stood before the tree. It was the only thing alive in that expanse. Twisted branches clawed at the sky, gnarled roots sprawled outward, clutching the earth like desperate fingers. The bark was blackened, charred in places, and the air around it felt different. Heavier. Colder. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe whispers carried by the wind, the trick of an overactive imagination. But as I drew closer, the sound began. Faint at first, like a sigh just beyond my hearing. Then words, fragmented and indistinct. "Help us." I froze, every instinct screaming to run. But something rooted me in place, a pull I couldn't explain. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. They weren't carried by the wind, they emanated from the tree itself. A hollow, mournful chorus of voices. I reached out, hesitant, my fingers brushing the rough bark. The moment we made contact, the whispers became screams. Part 2. I stumbled back, clutching my chest as the cacophony subsided. My breath came in shallow gasps, heart hammering against my ribs. The voices had been so clear, so visceral. 1,000 cries of anguish compressed into a single second. What had I just touched? The field around me seemed darker now, the sky more oppressive. Even the air carried a metallic tang, sharp and acrid. I glanced at the tree, half expecting it to lash out or move, but it remained still, its branches swaying gently in an unfelt breeze. Then I saw it, a carving etched into the bark, barely visible against the blackened surface. Leaning closer, I traced the markings with trembling fingers. A name. Margaret Ellis. The whispers returned, softer this time, weaving themselves into words. Margaret, they said, the name stretched and distorted. My mouth went dry as I looked closer. There were more carvings, dozens, maybe hundreds, spiraling around the trunk. Names. All names. I stepped back, the realization dawning like ice in my veins. These weren't just markings. They were graves. A thought whispered in the back of my mind, as chilling as the voices themselves, how many souls are trapped here? The field was vast and barren, but the tree, it felt like the heart of it. The whispers, the names, they spoke of lives stolen, of fates sealed. Who had put them here? And why? I turned to leave, but the moment I stepped away, a shadow moved at the edge of my vision. Something darted behind the tree, quick and silent. My blood ran cold as I spun around, scanning the field. "Who's there?" I called, my voice sounding small against the expanse. The shadow didn't answer, but the whispers grew louder, a chorus of pleading voices. "Stay, listen." And then, one voice, clearer than the rest, "Don't leave us." Part 3. My feet betrayed me, carrying me back to the tree despite every rational thought urging me to flee. The closer I got, the more distinct the voices became. Each one was different, male, female, old, young, but all shared the same undertone of despair. "What are you?" I asked, my voice shaking. The whispers paused, as though considering my question. Then they answered, a single word spoken by countless voices in unison. "Prisoners." The word hit me like a physical blow. Prisoners? Of what? I glanced at the carvings again, my mind racing. If these were graves, then the souls of the dead. No, that couldn't be right. This was madness. "Who did this to you?" I asked. The whispers rose, overlapping in a chaotic jumble. Names. Accusations. Pleas for justice. It was impossible to make sense of them all. But one name stood out, repeated over and over again: Elias. Who's Elias? I demanded. The tree seemed to shudder, its branches creaking ominously. The voices grew quieter, more measured. They told me a story, pieced together from fragments of despair. Elias was a man, no, something more than a man. A figure of cruelty and power who had bound these souls to the tree, trapping them for eternity. Why? The reasons were as fragmented as the voices themselves: vengeance, hatred, control. I felt a surge of anger. How do I free you? The whispers fell silent. The tree loomed above me, its shadow stretching unnaturally long. For the first time, the voices sounded afraid. You can't, they said. If you try, he'll come. Who? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The answer came, slow and deliberate, each syllable dripping with dread: Elias. Part 4. That night, I couldn't sleep. The tree haunted my thoughts, its whispers echoing in my mind. Elias. The name lingered, heavy and foreboding. Who, or what, was he? And why had he done this? I couldn't let it go. By morning, I had resolved to return. The field was colder than before, frost creeping over the dead grass despite the season. The tree stood as I'd left it, but the air around it felt alive, charged with something unseen. I approached cautiously, every step weighed down by an invisible force. I'm back, I said, feeling foolish for speaking to a tree. What do I need to do? The whispers returned, hesitant at first, then urgent. They spoke of rituals, symbols, and blood. A way to sever the bonds that held them, but at a cost. What kind of cost? I asked. The voices didn't answer directly, but their tone shifted, filled with warning and sorrow. Whatever it was, it wouldn't be small. I found the first symbol carved into the ground near the tree's roots, faint but unmistakable, a circle with jagged lines radiating outward. The moment I touched it, the air grew colder, and a low hum vibrated through the earth. You're close, the voices urged. But hurry. I traced the symbol into the dirt with trembling hands, completing its form. The hum grew louder, more insistent. Then the earth beneath me cracked, a thin line splitting the ground. And from the crack came a sound. A low, guttural growl. I stumbled backward from the tree, its bark still warm under my fingertips, as if alive. The whispers faded to a dull murmur, but the oppressive weight of their presence remained, thick in the cold air. The carved name, Margaret Ellis, seemed to burn itself into my mind. I glanced around the barren field. The place was eerily silent except for the faint rustling of the tree's twisted branches. The horizon stretched out in every direction, an endless expanse of dead grass and cracked soil. It felt like the world had forgotten this place. But the tree hadn't forgotten. My eyes drifted back to the carvings on the bark. Now that I knew they were there, I couldn't stop seeing them. Names upon names, etched into the gnarled surface, each one slightly different in size and depth. They spiraled up the trunk and disappeared into the shadows of the twisted limbs. I traced another name with my fingers, David Morrow. The bark felt rough, but beneath it, there was something else, a faint vibration, like a heartbeat just out of sync with my own. As I touched it, a sharp whisper sliced through the quiet. Leave. The voice was distinct, cutting through the murmur of the others. My breath hitched as I snatched my hand away. The whispers surged again, their chaotic chorus rising like a tide. Stop, no, stay, don't leave. The voices fought over one another, a cacophony of emotions, anger, fear, desperation. My pulse quickened as a chill crept up my spine. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over an exposed root. What are you? I managed to choke out. The whispers paused, a strange stillness settling over the field. Then, as if responding to some unseen signal, they began again, weaving into a single voice. Prisoners. The word was heavy, weighted with despair. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the way the hair on my arm stood on end. Prisoners of what? I asked, my voice trembling. The tree groaned, its branches creaking like old bones. The air felt colder now, and the metallic tang I'd noticed earlier grew stronger. The whispers responded, but their words were jumbled and incoherent, like a radio tuned to the wrong frequency. But one name broke through, clear and sharp: Elias. I froze. Who is Elias? The tree's branches swayed, though there was no wind. The name echoed again, louder this time, repeated by dozens of voices: Elias. Elias. I backed away, my instincts screaming at me to leave, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. The whispers grew louder, their tone urgent, pleading. Stay, listen, help us. My hands trembled as I reached into my pocket and fumbled for my phone. If this was some kind of prank, I was going to document it. But when I lifted the phone to take a photo, the screen flickered and died. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. My head snapped up, heart hammering. Something, or someone, was watching me. A figure darted behind the tree, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. Who's there? I called, my voice cracking. No answer. Just the whispers, softer now, almost coaxing. Don't go. I glanced at the tree again, its darkened bark seeming to shift under my gaze. My gut told me to leave, to run as far and as fast as I could. But my feet remained rooted, as if the ground itself held me in place. The whispers surged again, a single voice rising above the others. It was clearer, stronger, and filled with pain. Don't leave us. The words cut through me like a knife. Against all reason, I stepped closer. What do you want from me? I asked. The response came not from the voices, but from the ground beneath the tree. A deep crack split the earth, jagged and unnatural. A foul, sulfuric stench wafted up, making me gag. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl rising from the depths. Something was waking up. The growl reverberated through the ground, shaking my knees and sending a cold shock up my spine. I staggered back, staring at the widening crack beneath the tree. Dark, claw-like roots jutted out from the fissure, writhing as if alive. The whispers surged again, frantic now, their dissonant voices drowning out the growl. Don't let it out, please, stop it. The whispers seemed terrified, begging me to act. But what could I possibly do against something like this? My heart raced as the crack widened, revealing something glistening and black just below the surface. I turned to run, desperate to escape whatever was rising from the earth. But the field didn't let me go so easily. My feet slipped on the uneven ground, roots curling up to trip me. The air itself seemed heavier, pressing down on my chest as I struggled to breathe. Then I heard it. Elias. The name wasn't whispered this time. It was spoken, low and resonant, with a weight that seemed to still the world. The growling ceased, replaced by a profound silence. Even the whispers fell quiet, as if holding their collective breath. Slowly, I turned back toward the tree. A figure now stood at its base, emerging from the fissure. It was tall and gaunt, its silhouette barely human. Shadows clung to its form like smoke, obscuring its features. But its eyes, they burned like embers, glowing with an unnatural light. It tilted its head, regarding me with an almost curious expression. You came, it said, its voice deep and smooth, with a hint of amusement. I've been waiting. My throat tightened. Who are you? It stepped closer, the shadows swirling around its body. The embers of its eyes seemed to bore into me, rooting me in place. I am Elias, it said, its tone dripping with malice. And you, little one, have trespassed. The whispers returned, faint and pleading. Run, leave, go now. But I couldn't move. Something about Elias's presence held me captive, an invisible force pinning me to the spot. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. What do you want? I managed to croak. Elias chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding beneath a heavy weight. Want, it said, the word stretching unnaturally. I already have what I want. It gestured to the tree, its skeletal hand trailing through the air. This is my domain, my sanctuary. And those who wander here. The shadows around it thickened, coiling like serpents. Become mine. I stumbled back, my instincts screaming at me to flee, but my body refused to cooperate. The fissure beneath the tree widened further, and the ground trembled as if the earth itself was recoiling from Elias's presence. What are you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elias grinned, his teeth unnaturally sharp and white against the darkness of his form. I am the warden, he said. And he gestured toward the tree, where the carvings of names seemed to glow faintly. Are my charges? The whispers grew louder, anguished and desperate. He lies. We're prisoners. Help us. Elias's expression darkened, the embers of his eyes flaring. Quiet, he commanded. The whispers fell silent immediately, as if snuffed out. My mind reeled. What have you done to them? Elias's grin widened. I gave them purpose. They came to me, wandering, lost. I offered them sanctuary, and they accepted. Their spirits nourish the roots of this tree, and in return, they are spared the torments of the void. His words felt like poison, sinking into my thoughts and clouding my judgment. But the whispers, they had pleaded for help, begged me to free them. They didn't choose this, I said, my voice trembling but defiant. Elias laughed, the sound echoing across the barren field. Choice is an illusion, he said. They are here because they belong here. And now, he took another step forward, his shadowy form looming over me. So do you. Panic surged through me as the fissure beneath the tree began to glow, a sickly red light spilling out from its depths. The air grew hotter, oppressive, as if the field itself was coming alive. But then, faint and almost imperceptible, the whispers returned. You can stop him, break the bond, but hurry. How? I whispered back, desperate for guidance. The voices spoke in unison, their words clear for the first time. The names. Destroy the names. Elias's head snapped toward the tree, his eyes narrowing. Silence, he roared, his voice shaking the ground. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. Summoning every ounce of courage, I sprinted toward the tree. My fingers dug into the bark, clawing at the names. The moment I scratched the first one, Margaret Ellis, the tree shuddered violently, and the whispers rose in a deafening crescendo. Elias screamed, a sound of pure rage and agony. Stop, he bellowed, his form flickering like a dying flame. But I didn't stop. I clawed at another name, David Morrow, and the tree groaned, its branches writhing as if in pain. The fissure beneath it began to close, the red glow fading. You'll pay for this, Elias growled, his voice trembling with fury. I didn't care. I kept going, tearing at the bark, the voices guiding me as Elias's shadow loomed closer. And then, everything went dark. The darkness wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, pressing in from all sides as if I'd been plunged into a void. My breathing came fast and shallow, the sound swallowed by the oppressive black. For a moment, I thought I'd been buried alive. Then I heard the whispers. Faint at first, like distant murmurs carried on a non-existent wind. They grew louder, sharper, until they surrounded me. You're close, keep going, don't stop now. I reached out blindly, my fingers brushing something rough and cold. The bark of the tree. Its presence was grounding, a lifeline in the nothingness. But Elias's voice cut through the whispers, low and venomous. Foolish, he hissed, his tone coiling around me like a serpent. You think you can undo what I've built? You think you can defy me? A sharp wind whipped around me, chilling me to the bone. I felt something brush against my arm, a shadowy tendril curling around my wrist. I yanked my hand away, heart pounding, and clung tighter to the tree. You don't belong here, Elias snarled, his voice growing louder, angrier. "But if you insist on staying, I'll make you part of it." I felt the ground tremble beneath me, the earth cracking open again. The whispers surged, a frantic chorus of panic and urgency. "Finish it. Free us." Summoning every ounce of strength, I dug my fingers into the bark. My nails scraped against the rough surface, tearing at the names etched into it. The tree shuddered violently, the air around it crackling with energy. "Stop!" Elias roared, his voice splitting the darkness like thunder. But I didn't stop. I clawed at another name, Sarah Green, and the whispers turned into a roar of triumph. The ground beneath me began to stabilize, the cracks sealing themselves. Elias's form flickered into view, his shadowy body writhing like smoke caught in a gale. His burning eyes locked onto mine, blazing with fury. "You cannot save them," he spat. "They are mine." I clawed at another name, the bark splintering under my fingers. This time, the tree let out a deep, guttural groan, as if it were alive and in pain. The fissure beneath it began to close further, the sickly red light dimming. Elias staggered, his form becoming more unstable. The shadows around him thinned, revealing glimpses of something skeletal and frail beneath. "You don't understand what you're doing," he shouted, his voice laced with desperation now. "Without me, they'll be lost. They'll suffer." The whispers grew louder, defiant. "No more lies. Free us." I hesitated, Elias's words clawing at the edges of my mind. What if he was right? What if breaking the bond condemned these souls to something worse? But then I thought of their anguish, the pleading in their voices. I couldn't leave them like this. With a scream of defiance, I tore at the bark with both hands, ripping away entire chunks of it. The tree trembled violently, its branches thrashing as if caught in a storm. The names began to fade, one by one, their glow dimming until they vanished completely. Elias let out a blood-curdling scream, his form collapsing in on itself. The shadows that had cloaked him dissipated, leaving behind a withered, crumbling figure. His burning eyes flickered, dimmed, and finally went out. The whispers fell silent. The oppressive darkness lifted, replaced by a dim gray light. I blinked, disoriented, as the barren field came back into focus. The tree stood before me, its bark now smooth and unmarked. The air was still, the silence deafening. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then the ground beneath the tree began to shift. The ground beneath the tree trembled, cracks spidering out in all directions. The barren soil pulsed with a faint red glow, as though the earth itself was bleeding. My heart pounded as I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't over. The whispers, once frantic and pleading, were now eerily silent. The oppressive weight of the air had returned, heavier than ever, as if the field itself was holding its breath. The tree groaned, its branches creaking like an ancient ship caught in a storm. Then the ground split open. A jagged fissure tore through the earth, and from its depths emerged something unspeakable. Blackened roots twisted and writhed like serpents, dragging themselves upward. Embedded within them were faces, twisted, screaming, their features frozen in agony. They weren't carvings like on the tree. They were real. I stumbled backward, my stomach turning at the sight. The faces shifted, their mouths moving soundlessly, their eyes wide with terror. And then I heard it, a deep, guttural voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You have made a grave mistake." Elias's voice, but different now. Hollow. Broken. His withered form began to rise from the fissure, held aloft by the writhing roots. His body was more skeletal than before, his shadowy guise stripped away. What remained was a grotesque parody of a man, his skin cracked and flaking like old bark. "You think you've freed them?" he spat, his glowing eyes rekindling with fury. "You've only unleashed something far worse." The faces embedded in the roots began to scream, their voices piercing and discordant. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it did little to muffle the sound. The whispers returned, faint but resolute, cutting through the cacophony. "Do not listen to him. Finish what you started. Elias's form twisted, the roots around him thrashing violently. Do you hear them? He snarled. They're terrified. You've torn away their sanctuary, and now they'll be devoured by the void. I faltered, his words sinking into me like barbs. The voices in the roots were anguished, their screams a symphony of suffering. Had I truly doomed them to something worse? Lies, the whispers shouted, more unified now. He feeds on their fear. Do not stop. Elias's eyes locked onto mine, burning brighter. End this now, he commanded. Restore the bond, and I may spare you. The ground beneath me buckled, forcing me to my knees. The fissure widened, the red glow intensifying. The roots lashed out, one of them grazing my arm. It burned like fire, the pain searing and immediate. But the whispers pushed back, their tone urgent and insistent. Destroy the heart. The tree must fall. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling. The heart? I shouted, my voice barely audible over the chaos. The whispers answered in unison, the roots. My eyes darted to the mass of blackened roots writhing at the base of the tree. They pulsed with the same red glow as the fissure, their twisted forms anchoring Elias to the earth. He saw where I was looking and roared, his skeletal form lunging toward me. You will not. I dodged his attack, the heat of his presence scorching the air around me. My hands fumbled for something, anything, I could use. My fingers brushed against a jagged rock half buried in the dirt. With a desperate cry, I grabbed the rock and charged at the roots. The moment the jagged edge struck the first root, a shockwave rippled through the ground. The root writhed and screeched, black ichor oozing from the wound. Elias screamed, the sound inhuman and filled with rage. You'll destroy us all. I didn't stop. I hacked at another root, then another, each strike sending waves of pain through Elias's form. His body flickered, his fiery eyes dimming with each blow. The tree itself began to shake, its branches flailing wildly as the roots were severed. The whispers rose in a triumphant chorus. Yes. Keep going. Free us. I struck the final root, the force of the blow sending me sprawling backward. The tree let out an otherworldly wail, its trunk splitting down the middle. Light poured out from the fissure, blinding and pure, as if the souls trapped within were finally escaping. Elias fell to the ground, his body crumbling into ash. His glowing eyes flickered one last time before extinguishing completely. The light grew brighter, engulfing the field. The whispers, now soft and grateful, spoke one last time. Thank you. And then, silence. When the light faded, the tree was gone. In its place was a single, unmarked patch of earth. The field, once barren and lifeless, now teemed with green shoots, tiny blades of grass swaying gently in the breeze. It was over. Or so I thought. As I turned to leave, I noticed something glinting in the dirt where the tree had stood. A small, blackened shard of wood. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. And the whispers began again. The shard in my hand felt warm, almost alive. Faint whispers curled around the edges of my mind, just out of reach, their voices too soft to understand but impossible to ignore. My heart raced as I stared at the blackened fragment, its surface slick and glistening like obsidian. I should have left it there, buried in the dirt. But something compelled me to keep it. My fingers tightened around the shard as the whispers grew louder, more insistent, a rhythmic pulse beating in time with my own heart. You should destroy it, I said aloud, trying to convince myself. End it for good. But I didn't. I slipped the shard into my pocket and turned away from the barren field. The world felt different as I left, lighter, quieter. The tree was gone, and with it, the oppressive weight that had hung in the air. The green shoots that now dotted the field were a sign of renewal, a fresh start. Yet as I walked, the whispers in my mind refused to fade. Weeks passed, and the field haunted my thoughts. At first, I told myself it was nothing more than lingering fear, a shadow of the horrors I had seen. But the shard, It pulsed in my pocket, an unrelenting presence. No matter where I went, no matter what I did, it was there, whispering. The whispers grew louder at night, filling my dreams with fragmented images. A flash of blackened bark. The writhing roots. Faces contorted in agony. And Elias, his ember-like eyes staring into mine, his voice echoing in the void. You cannot escape me. I stopped sleeping. My days blurred into nights, my mind unraveling with each passing hour. The shard seemed heavier now, its presence a constant weight in my pocket. The whispers no longer waited for the quiet of night, they were with me always, a ceaseless murmur that grew more coherent by the day. Take it back, they said. Return it to the tree. But the tree was gone. Or was it? I couldn't resist the pull any longer. One stormy evening, I found myself driving back to the field. Rain lashed against the windshield as thunder growled in the distance, the world outside shrouded in darkness. The shard in my pocket seemed to hum with anticipation, the whispers urging me forward. When I arrived, the field was unrecognizable. The green shoots had grown into tall, swaying grass, and the air smelled fresh and clean. But at the center of it all, where the tree had once stood, the ground remained barren, a perfect circle of lifeless earth. I stepped out of the car, clutching the shard tightly. Lightning illuminated the field, casting long shadows that danced across the grass. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Place it there, return it. I approached the circle, my heart hammering in my chest. The ground felt colder here, as if the warmth of the world had been stripped away. Kneeling, I pulled the shard from my pocket and held it out in front of me. The whispers stopped. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then the earth beneath my feet began to tremble. A low groan echoed across the field as cracks formed in the barren circle. Red light seeped through the fissures, bathing the landscape in an eerie glow. The shard in my hand grew hot, searing my palm. I screamed and dropped it, watching as it sank into the ground like a stone sinking into water. The fissures widened, and from them emerged the tree. It was smaller than before, its branches gnarled and twisted, its bark blackened and oozing. The air grew thick with the stench of decay as the tree groaned, stretching its limbs toward the sky. And then I heard it. His voice. You couldn't leave it alone, Elias said, his tone laced with mockery. You brought me back. I stumbled backward as his form began to take shape, emerging from the trunk of the tree. He was stronger now, his skeletal frame cloaked in shadows once more. His burning eyes locked onto mine, and a wicked grin spread across his face. This time, there's no one to stop me, he said. The whispers returned, frantic and pleading. No, we cannot go back, not again. But it was too late. The tree pulsed with life, its roots writhing beneath the soil. Elias stepped closer, his presence suffocating. You freed them, he said, gesturing to the field around us. And look what it cost you. Their freedom is fleeting. I, however, endure. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. There had to be a way to stop him, to destroy the tree for good. But the whispers offered no guidance this time, only fear. Elias extended a hand, shadows curling around his fingers. You brought me back, he said, his voice dripping with malice. Now you will join me. The shadows surged forward, wrapping around me like tendrils. I struggled, gasping for breath as they pulled me closer to the tree. But then, deep within the whispers, a single voice rose above the rest. There is one way. The words cut through the chaos, sharp and clear. What is it? I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. The voice hesitated, then spoke again. You must become the warden. My blood ran cold. The meaning was clear. To stop Elias, to destroy the tree, I had to take his place. Elias's laughter filled the air, dark and mocking. You could never bear it, he said. You're too weak. The whispers swirled around me, their tone resolute. You must decide. Now. I looked at the tree, its roots writhing, its branches clawing at the stormy sky. I looked at Elias, his ember-like eyes burning with malice. And then I made my choice. As the first rays of dawn broke over the field, the tree was silent. Its branches hung still, its bark smooth and unmarked. The air was calm, and the whispers were gone. At the base of the tree, a single name was etched into the bark. Mine. And somewhere deep within the earth, I began to whisper. The field remains quiet now, a place untouched by time and memory. The grass sways gently in the breeze, and the sun casts its golden light across the endless expanse. But at the center of it all, where the tree stands, there is a stillness that defies nature. The bark is smooth, unblemished, save for a single name carved with meticulous precision. My name. The whispers are no longer frantic, no longer filled with terror. They are subdued, a constant murmur at the edges of existence, tethered to the roots of the tree. I understand now. I feel their pain, their despair, their longing for freedom. But I also feel the tree's hunger, the weight of its endless thirst. It pulses through me like a second heartbeat, demanding, insatiable. This is my duty now. My punishment. My purpose. From the depths of the void, I hear them, wandering souls, drawn to the tree's call. They come in search of sanctuary, of answers, of power. Some come out of desperation, others out of greed. All are destined to join the roots. And when they arrive, I am there to greet them. They see the tree as it once was, ancient and foreboding. They hear the whispers and feel the pull, the same pull that ensnared me. But they don't see me, not at first. Not until it's too late. I watch them, and I wait. And when they touch the bark, I whisper. Welcome.